friggin' sentence. Let me read that again. This is really important. Mrs. Bridge is Evan Connell Jr., who's kind of a goofy looking guy. That's okay. But he's a great writer. Great writer. And Mrs. Bridge, he wrote two. They're separated by about 12 years. I think the first one was Mrs. Bridge, and then he wrote a Mr. Bridge. And it sounds awful. It's about this family in Kansas City. The father's a banker. I think he's a banker. And this book is her point of view on their life together. And Mr. Bridge is his point of view on the same life together. And it's just wonderful. It's witty and funny, and it's the short chapters, and that kind of got me turned on, or part of it. Jerzy Kosinski is another one with the short chapters, steps and things. People don't read him anymore, I don't think. Here's my good friend Stephen King, and Different Seasons. This is another one of my favorites, and this is 4 novellas that he wrote, which I thought were all great, and most of them turned into movies. I'm not going to go figure out what the movies were, but and I always thought when reading this that, you know, obviously he's done well, but at that time most everything he was writing was just horror, and he's very good at it, obviously. But you read this, and this isn't really so much horror, and I went, well, this guy could have been, and maybe he is a major novelist, but could really have been a major novelist if he had decided to branch out a little bit. Not that I'm giving advice. Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath, or whatever. This novel, very important to me because you know, I really became a writer working at the mental hospital, McLean Hospital in Belmont. And you know, this is about her time at a mental hospital. She ultimately killed herself, so the hospital didn't work. But they tried their best. And that was a time when I really kind of became a writer and started to get serious about it and just wrote every day. Became obsessive. So Sylvia was important to me. This is interesting in the sense of, it's another book that people don't read anymore. Fans know it's Frederick Exley. Total lunatic. He doesn't look like it. He looks like really straight now, but he's crazy. But A Fan's Notes is about this teacher upstate New York, and because he's a teacher at this school, he goes every weekend. He travels about 40 miles away and gets drunk. And the only thing in his life that makes sense is watching the Giants. So he watches the Giants in this town 40 miles away and gets drunk every Sunday. And it's A Fan's Notes. And the interesting thing about it was, I loved this when I read it. I read it again a year or so ago, and I wasn't that impressed with it, which surprised me because I really had loved it. Another one from that same period, as a young guy trying to get started, 92 in the Shade, Thomas McGuane. And this one I read a few years ago, and this one did hold up, and McGuane holds up. He's still writing for the New Yorker and stuff. He's a great writer, really good looking guy. I can't remember, Elizabeth Ashley, I think it is. She was a very attractive, good actor at the time. And she and he spent some time together, and she said something like that, I feel lucky that Thomas passed through my life, which I don't know what that means, but it's kind of cool. I'd like to have somebody say that about me, but nobody has. Another book that people haven't, although it was a terrific movie with the woman from Hunger Games.
Jennifer Lawrence,
yeah. And this was her first one. I remember watching this. I think this might have been her first movie. It was certainly early, and I went like, wow, she has it. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Once again, the mental hospital stuff. So I love this. Ken Kesey. This is a hell of a bad cover, but interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's a good cover. Who knows? But Kesey, I loved. And he only wrote a couple of books. At one point, Tom Wolfe went out there, and you know, all these, they're hippies. I mean, Kesey and the whole gang. And they were sort of making fun because Wolf was out there in his white suit and, his whatever, and fancy little. And he said to him, you guys are supposed to be the nonconformists, and I'm the only person in the room that really is a nonconformist because you're all wearing the same stuff. So I read a lot of kids' books. This is for kids and adults, but The Book Thief. And it's just a great take on what it was like for people growing up in Nazi Germany who weren't Jewish. And it's really wonderful, and any adults or if you got teenagers, it's a great book for them to read from my. Another book that kind of turned me on, George Higgins in general, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, but all of his Kogans Trade was another one. Everything he wrote was great. He died too young, lawyer, but I still like him even though he was a lawyer. But just a wonderful, wonderful dialogue. I talked about Parker a little before, Robert Parker, also wonderful dialogue. And Higgins said that where he learned to write dialogue, because as a lawyer, he had to read all these transcripts, and a lot of them were tough guys and whatever, and that's where he got the voices in his head, which is kind of cool. So read a lot of transcripts from trials, and you'll learn how to write. Sevenstory Mountain, this is another pivotal thing. When I was at Vanderbilt, I was just kind of mixed up, doing a little too much pot, etc., or other things. And I went up to the Trappist Monastery in Gethsemane in Kentucky, spent about 10 days there. And Merton, he was a student at Columbia trying to figure out things, and he went to the monastery and just stayed there for the rest of his life and wrote this book about the Sevenstory Mountain. So here is a book about a Trappist monastery, and it becomes like a #1 bestseller, sold about 10 million copies. Just amazing though. And the reason it did, it's just a great book. At any rate, yeah, there's the pictures. Yes, I remember it. Day of the Jackal. I was, this literary snob, Vanderbilt, etc., blah, 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 blah. Didn't read any bestsellers, just all serious stuff. I said, And, but somewhere in there, I read Day of the Jackal and The Exorcist, and I went, these are kind of cool. And it occurred to me that I believed, and I believe I was accurate, I didn't have the stuff in me to write something like 100 Years of Solitude, but I might be able to write something, directionally like The Day of the Jackal, which is why I sat down and tried to write some mysteries. Speaking of 100 Years of Solitude, here it is. I have several copies. This is probably my favorite book. And it starts, right in the, you just start, first sentences. There's a Vance Borgelli, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He had this book in the first sentences, like most men, I tell 1,000 lies a day. I love that, man. What a great line, because it's a good line in itself, but it also tells you that the narrator is a total liar, so you can't believe anything he says. And that his view of the world is that men tell 1,000 lies a day, So he tells you an awful lot in one sentence. At any rate, but the first sentence here, many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. What a friggin' sentence. Let me read that again. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, how cool, Colonel Aureliano Buendia, I probably pronounced it incorrectly, was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Wow, cool, discover ice. At any rate, so, that's an idea of like some of these books that affected me, a little sense of why they affected me, who cares, but I care.